Shortly after the Second World War, Australia saw at the time a rise in bold and radical house designs, demonstrating the principles of modernism. Designs like the Featherston House and the Butterfly House were unfamiliar to Australians as it stood away from the conventional structures and materials in mid-20th century. Among the architectures involved in pushing modernism into suburban homes was Peter McIntyre. McIntyre established himself as an avant-garde and experimental architect through his works such as the iconic River House and the 1956 Olympic Games swimming stadium. Another architect that will be looked at is Kerstin Thompson, who is a modern Melbourne-based architect where we will explore how her works bear similarities to some of McIntyre's work. Peter McIntyre was born in Kew, 1927. His father was an architect and at an early age of 7, McIntyre worked reluctantly as an office boy for his father's practice. Despite his dad's profession, McIntyre wasn't interested in architecture. Nevertheless, McIntyre was enrolled into Melbourne University to study architecture by his father as he didn't have much say as a youth. McIntyre said he loved the first year of architecture. However, it wasn't because of what he learned. Quote, I absolutely loved it, not the architecture, the fact that there were girls. I'd never seen a girl in my life until after 16. It's not until McIntyre met Robin Boyd and Roy Grants that he found interest and passion for architecture. Both were the greatest influences of McIntyre's life. Robin Boyd was McIntyre's tutor in university, and much like Boyd, McIntyre believed that modern architecture could save the world. McIntyre and many other architects studying architecture during mid-20th century were trained in what they called functional school. The principle was to express buildings for its purpose and function. However, McIntyre realized and wanted to direct his buildings towards how people feel and interact within the buildings, in which he coined the term emotional functionalism. Throughout his career, McIntyre aimed to realize his philosophy. In the 1950s, Melbourne was awarded to hold the 1956 Olympic Games. A stadium was needed to be built and a building competition was held for it. The requirement of the stadium was to have two pools, a diving pool and a swimming pool, with 5,000 seats to rise on both sides of the swimming pool. The focus of this competition was not about the appearance or the functionality of the stadium, instead, it was about the economics. This is because the 1950s was shortly after the Second World War and there was a shortage of materials. In Melbourne, there was a great collective sense that the Olympics should not be held as there was a lack of infrastructure in the outer suburbs and houses were being built without sewage systems and without roads. Furthermore, the Labour government at the time under John Cain was also apprehensive about holding the Games. Thus, the focus of the competition was how to construct the stadium cheaply. McIntyre, along with Kevin Borland and Phyllis Murphy, had won the competition by reducing the amount of materials for the stadium. They were able to do this by the principle of post-stress and pre-stress concrete. The principle was introduced to McIntyre at his final year studying at the Melbourne University by an engineer, Norman Marcin. With this principle, McIntyre and the team were able to reduce the amount of steel by 35%. Fortunately, one of the judges at the competition was Professor Francis, who was the engineering professor at Melbourne University and was able to confirm the calculations. The stadium was the first building to apply the principle in the world. Not only was the engineering experimental, the design was unconventional and radical. The stadium was a vast steel infrastructure and had strong, bold geometrical structure appearing like a bunker soaring in the sky. The stadium allows vast amount of light to enter through the large windows at the end, creating a great sense of openness and freedom inside. With the money earned from winning the competition, McIntyre was able to begin building one of his most iconic buildings, the River House. The River House was also known as the Butterfly House. It is a small home built on the riverside of the Yarra River in Kew. The bold triangular shape of the home was strange and unfamiliar to the public. What's also amazing about this home was how McIntyre adapted this building to what was deemed an impossible landscape. The site of the building had belonged to the Buchan estate. However, the piece of land was undeveloped because it was deemed too steep for any structure to be built on. Furthermore, there was no access to the area and was subjected to floods. Despite these reasons, McIntyre bought the land for around £200. McIntyre stated himself he didn't see any potential value, but it was because of a romance with the land that he wanted it. McIntyre applied the same principle of pre-stress and post-stress concrete that was used in the Olympic Stadium to the river house. He found a view on the site where he could place two 40-foot cantilevers to balance with each other, which led to a defining triangular shape of the home. Extending out from the base, the 40-foot cantilevers appeared like wings, which gave the home the alternative name, the Butterfly House. The cantilevers also demonstrate the combination of lightness and strength that defines the building structure. With the River House, McIntyre applied emotional functionalism with the use of bold colors to contrast the surrounding area. The bold colors used on the River House was to create a sense of warmth against the dark green trees as there was lack of sunshine going into the house. However, there was an unprecedented outcome. During autumn, when the leaves fell from the trees, the bold colors of the River House made the home an eye-catching attraction to anyone on the Victoria Bridge. While the colors on the exterior are no longer present, the color palette remains in the interior of the home. The River House remains today as one of Australia's iconic homes that defied conventional means of an appearance and structure of a house. The home was not only significant in progressing the movement of modernism in Australia, but to the architect himself. McIntyre created other radical buildings in the 1950s, such as the Stargazer House. McIntyre had established himself as an experimental and avant-garde architect. While his work is well received today as an iconic structure of the application of modernism, it cannot be said the same during McIntyre's early career. In the 1950s, modernism was still new to Australia. Modernism defied the structure of conventional homes, and this change was not all well received by the public. McIntyre described the move being too brutal, where people reacted against it. In the Australian Home Beautiful magazine, one of McIntyre's building was featured. The article was titled Two Unusual Homes. The author describes the design as unusual that would frighten the average builder and stating that it is clearly the work of a lively and adventurous mind. The author's language shows a slight condescending tone towards McIntyre's work and seemingly questions him as an architect by referring to what good architectural design would be like. When accessing any good contemporary house and any good architect. The article is an example of representing the public's response to the rise of modernism in architecture during the 1950s, where there was mixed reaction of this radical change from conventional homes. By 1960, McIntyre recalled, "I had the reputation of being so avant-garde that people didn't want me at all." Despite this, McIntyre never gave up on designing houses and worked on commercial development and planning projects through the 60s and 70s. Kerstin Thompson is a contemporary Melbourne-based architect. Thompson has established herself as one of today's leading modern architects through her work such as House at Big Hill. While her work primarily focuses on the philosophy of connecting the landscape and building with its surrounding and its community, the realization of this can welcome people with certain emotions which intertwines with McIntyre's philosophy of emotional functionalism. House at Big Hill is a vacation home near Victoria's Great Ocean Road. The triangular structure of the building is oriented to take advantage of the outside view. The combining of timber against the concrete walls and floors offsets the cold hardness of the solid material to provide an intimate quality within the building. Furthermore, the views captured by the picture frame windows provide large amounts of light, creating a balance between a harmonic balance between the shadows and light. This balance and the use of materials provides a solid retreat in which creates a mood of comfort and rest. The emotion and mood created from the realization of the plan relates back to McIntyre's emotional functionalism, which moves away from expressing buildings for purpose but towards how people react in the environment. Peter McIntyre's work has been influential in contributing to instilling modernism into the Australian home. He continues his design practice today, working towards creating structures that respond to people's emotions. Like many that practice the principle of modernism, McIntyre and Thompson believe design is integral for the progression of a better and modern society.